People will often comment on our farm and say that it's a very unconventional farm. Release the Kraken! And a lot of these folks are often very intrigued on how to start their own unconventional farm. And so in today's video, I'm gonna give you a few tips on how to start an unconventional farm. And I'll even try to explain what an unconventional farm even is. Good morning, little runner ducks. Enjoying life in the freedom? So I think there's a rather broad definition of an unconventional farm. I mean, unconventional farms are farms that essentially don't follow the standard practice and template for what a farm could be. And I mean that both on like a conventional scale as well as a, small organic farming scale. And if you look at what we're doing here at Goldshaw Farm, it is admittedly very unconventional. I mean, the dominant animal we raise here on our farm is geese. We also do a fair amount of stuff with ducks. We do a lot with trees. And when people have that image of a farmer sitting on a tractor, growing acres and acres of crops, or the small organic farmer who's doing more of a market garden approach, or even the small farmer who's following much more of like the traditional Joel Salatin model of pigs, chickens, and beef. At this stage of the game, we're very much doing the opposite of the conventional farm approach. And we're also even veering pretty far away from the small farm orthodoxy that you often see. Look at those ducklings. They're growing up pretty quick. Some of them are almost the same size as the moms. Hello, Mr. Pablo Barn Cat. How are you, buddy? Good to see you this morning. Aw. Toby dog, don't get jealous of my affection for Pablo. I got plenty of love for you too there, pal. Good morning, teenage goslings. Out you go, guys. Rise and shine. Our group of teenage goslings are quite enjoyable. Over on TikTok, some folks have named them the Outsiders, kind of like, the S.E. Hinton book.
Nothing gold can stand.
And they really are becoming one of my favorite batches of birds we have here on the farm. The bird you see in the back, the one who keeps spreading his wings, that's Lenny. He's the developmentally slow goose, but he's really pretty darn adorable. And the reason I'm pointing this out to you while I'm talking about what it takes to start an unconventional farm, that actually goes to my first tip, which is to start with your values. If you want to have an unconventional farm, start to dream up what your farm's going to be and make sure that a core component of what that is based on what you value as a person in terms of concepts or ideals. For example, for me, it's really important to treat all of our animals with kindness, even the animals that we might be raising for meat. And so doing that in a lot of ways means creating this pastoral setting. It means observing the animals and how they behave. It means interacting with those animals and trying to give them the best possible care I can. And so as I was dreaming up how we'd want to approach farming here at Goldshaw Farm, that ideal was very much at the core of what we're trying to do. Now, what you might want to do from a values perspective, though, might be very different than what works on a commercial business side, which really gets to the second point I have about unconventional farms, in that you should very much have a business strategy be part of the backbone of your farm plan as well. And that business strategy really should emphasize being different rather than better. When I first moved up here and started thinking about starting a small farm enterprise to get things going here at Goldshaw Farm, the first animal enterprise I landed on was actually raising ducks for eggs. Because when I looked at the marketplace here in northern Vermont, you can find backyard chicken eggs for like $2 or $3 a dozen. And so I knew raising chickens for eggs was never going to be all that profitable or meaningful from a farm business perspective. But duck eggs were actually rather scarce up in the area at the time. And I also found that for the folks who did want duck eggs, I could charge a premium for them. Roughly about $6 or $7 even for a dozen eggs. And so we identified this niche that not everybody else was doing, and we tried to make that a core part of our farm's business strategy. And that strategic choice right there sent our farm on a whole different path. That meant that 3 years later, when you looked at our farm, we were far from the conventional small farm. But as a lot of you guys who know our farm story know, duck eggs for eating are not a core part of our business at this point. And the reason for that is actually the third idea that I wanted to throw out there for you guys, which is that a good unconventional farm is readily watching what's happening with their farm and finding ways to adapt and evolve. So to go back again to this idea of we started raising ducks for eggs, What we have found is that ducks for eating eggs is not a good business to be in, but ducks for hatching eggs is a tremendous business to be in. And whereas we could charge, you know, $6 or $7 for a dozen of eating eggs, we can charge $50 for a dozen hatching eggs. Oh, what are you guys doing? You want to go up the ramp? No. You know, in the next couple of days, I'm gonna actually start moving them into the duck house, and I'm not sure if they're totally ready yet. It's gonna be an interesting experiment to get them in there. But, you know, part of the reason why we even have the runner ducks is I wanted to introduce new genetics into my flock as I continue to build on my egg breeding business. And you know, another offshoot of the duck business is actually Mr. Toby Dog here, and the idea of potentially raising livestock guardian dog puppies for folks. We got Toby Dog here after there was an awful predator attack here on our farm back in 2019. And I really discovered just the beauty and joy of having livestock guardian dogs on the farm and how much good they do for protecting your poultry. And so that initial decision to raise ducks for eggs became an on-ramp for other businesses as well, like raising dogs. Now again, I'm not 100% that I'm gonna go into raising dogs yet, but it's something I'm exploring as we speak. And so I bring it up as an example of another business that's somewhat unconventional for the traditional farm approach. And as I think about what we're doing here overall at Goldshaw Farm, the idea of having these multiple businesses is, I think, another important characteristic of the unconventional farm. You see, my long-term plan for this farm is to probably have about half a dozen to a dozen different farm enterprises going here at Goldshaw Farm. I believe that that diversification element is another important part of what it takes to have that unconventional farm. You know, for example, I said that earlier that ducks were the first business that we started on the farm. That's kind of not exactly true, because really the first thing we started was planting the trees that we have here. And while some of the trees are still struggling, I've got other trees like this chestnut tree here that's up over 10 feet. And I wouldn't be shocked if we're starting to get some chestnuts from that tree next year. Having that diversified approach to how we run our farm allows me the time and space to create something like this and not be looking for cash immediately from the operation. But if I look out 20 years from now, I think those trees are going to be an important backbone of what our farm operations ultimately become. Which gets to yet another concept that I have of making sure the pieces all fit together. The idea of the space that we're creating here in this 10-acre permaculture orchard / duck and goose area is one where it allows for establishing a number of different farm enterprises that all work together. The geese and the cattle are going to ultimately control the grasses. The ducks and the chickens are going to help with the bugs and the pests. The trees are going to provide food and resources for me and the animals. And you got things like livestock guardian dogs and barn cats helping control some of the pests and predators that also pop up in an operation like this. Those ducks are pretty darn bold. They just cut right through this whole row of geese, and they don't have a care in the world. I am finding that doing this hybrid approach where I have the mother birds protecting the babies in a kind of warm environment like the chicken tractor that was the duck nursery is maybe the best way to get your animals raising their young naturally. And while some of these guys are going to get culled as we get into winter, a lot of these guys are going to stick around and be the breeding stock of future generations. And while I've screwed some things up with my goose hatching this year, and I know that that's going to impact my business profits for the year, I also feel like I've learned some valuable stuff this year. And so I'll be able to convert those hard lessons learned into future success and future growth. That kind of learning mindset I think is also important if you want to have an unconventional farm. You know, like I said earlier, it takes adaptability, and you can't just build a business plan and straight line perform to it for the next 5 to 10 years. Because the odds are you're going to learn a whole bunch of stuff in that first year that's going to completely shift the course that you're on. Watching the rudder ducks run around the farm is hysterical to me, because at first I thought they were just terrified of me when I was raising them inside here. Now that they're able to walk around and interact with other parts of the farm, it's very clear that it's not just me. They're afraid of everything. Let's see how our last hatching experiment of the year is going. Hey, Carmen. So as some of you viewers know, I actually embarked on a hatching experiment with my coach in Carmen here about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, I guess it was. She's doing really good. She stayed very much to her nest. She doesn't like it when I try to get in there, but we're gonna try to get her off. We're gonna look inside her eggs just for a minute. Excuse me, Carm. Let's see what's going on underneath there. Yep, you can see them. All right. She's got about 7, I think maybe 8 eggs underneath her that still seem viable. She's kicked out a couple of others over the last couple of days. It looked like there might be one that's not viable that she's starting to kick out as well. It's getting late in the season to be hatching eggs, but I'm gonna give her a shot. She might be the first full-size chicken I have who hatches out some birds here on the farm. And Cochins are generally known for being very good mothers, so we're gonna see how this goes. I'll give her some more food and some water, and I'll kick out our other chickens from in here so they don't harass her. Earlier on in her nesting process, there were a couple of birds who were really trying to steal her nest from her, and so that's why I've actually closed her in here, so she won't be bothered by the other birds. As far as the final tip I'd offer you guys who want to start an unconventional farm, I guess what I would say is this: you've got to be willing to take the time and put the energy in to tell your story. That advice probably rings true for all folks starting their farms, but when you're an unconventional farm, you have the additional challenge of getting your customers to understand what you're doing, because it's a model that they've probably never seen before. I think in this day and age in 2021, people are very accustomed to going to a farmer's market to buy some vegetables or to buy some sausages. It's much more unusual to try to get folks to buy tree seedlings or to buy hatching eggs from you. And so you've got to be willing to show people what you're doing, show people why you're different, and really get them engaged in the story of your farm. I mean, when it comes down to it, that's why I started this YouTube channel, and that's why I do videos on things like TikTok or Facebook. It's because having that outlet to tell my story to you all, it's what creates the future potential customers for our farm. I think for us specifically at Goldshaw Farm, we're also lucky that we're actually able to generate revenue from some of that activity. But not every farm does that, and not every farm should expect to do that. But every farm should expect to have to tell their story, because if you can't tell your story, you're very much gonna struggle as an unconventional farm. Come on, Daddy, out you go, come on. Daddy, Daddy, leave Carmen alone. Come on, Daddy, out. Out you go, girl, come on.